In 2258, reporter Benjamin Giraud embarked on a campaign with the apparent intent of slandering the Office of Naval Intelligence. In addition to his actions being unpatriotic and criminal, the most unfortunate consequence of these lies was ruining the reputation of one of the greatest figures in modern history. This edit seeks to restore naval intelligence's original commission of a profile on the hero, the legend, the man who saved us all, the Master Chief. Through the fabrications of Benjamin Giraud, we will hunt the truth.
Nobody saw it coming when they arrived. An alien race known as the Covenant. Before 2552, there was no way anything like that could ever happen on Earth. On one of those distant planets in the outer colonies? Maybe. But an attack on Earth? Couldn't happen. Until it did. It's called glassing. Covenant warships rain plasma down on a planet until everything and everyone on the surface melts. Usually it's complete world destruction. Earth only got a taste. The prolonged orbital bombardment destroyed East Africa, killing millions before it ended. None of us were safe anymore. But something else happened that day too. Or someone. You've heard the eyewitness accounts. Every skeptic has seen the footage. I was there, and yet still to this day, it's unbelievable. A massive man in green armor appeared seemingly out of nowhere in New Mombasa, performed superhuman feats to single-handedly repel a global invasion, and then disappeared? This was the Master Chief. The Unified Earth Government's military body, the UNSC, eventually released a statement. Who he is, where he came from, and that he's continuing to keep us safe. And that was that. But who is the Master Chief? Where did he come from? Is he continuing to keep us safe? I'm Benjamin Giraud, and this is Hunt the Truth. For all us cosmopolitan Earth types who don't venture into the far reaches of space, there's a planet way out in the outer colonies called Eridanus II. If you're thinking of visiting, don't bother. It was catastrophically glassed in a Covenant attack in 2530. But 19 years before it got wiped out, our hero, Master Chief Petty Officer John 117, then known as John, was born in a metropolis called Elysium City. That's where I started.
Do I remember him? Oh, yeah, you don't forget a kid like that.
That's Dion Govender. He chatted with me from his home in the outer colonies. Dion's retired now, but years ago he taught John at Elysium City Primary Education Facility number 119. Apparently schools in the outer colonies don't have the catchiest names.
John was something else. He was sharp and quick, always evaluating the situation. Other kids just gravitated to him, you know?
Dion seemed most excited to talk about John's athletic ability. The kids used to play King of the Hill after school. You know, the old game where you wrestle and push each other to try to be the last man standing.
I would walk by sometimes, see him playing after school, you know, and without fail, I swear, it was always John standing alone at the top of that hill.
Right.
Yeah, every single day. Yeah. Matter of fact, I think the other kids ended up fighting for who got to be king halfway up the hill, because nobody was messing with John.
I definitely remember John. You're going way...
That's Ellie Bloom, another lifelong resident of the outer colonies. When she was young, she and John lived on the same street, just a few houses down.
Well, he was a little younger than me, but let me tell you, that boy did not look like a kindergartner. He was a big kid. My friend Katrina and I used to meet him in this vacant lot in the neighborhood. The three of us would build these obstacle courses out of random junk and then race. You know, just kid stuff.
As Ellie talked about her early years in Elysium, it wasn't long before she was getting nostalgic.
On warm nights, sometimes our parents would let us go out to the green space and lie in the grass. And we'd just lie there, stare up at the stars. It was a nice place to grow up.
Finding Ellie was a huge win for me. When a planet's been glassed, tracking down former residents can be damn near impossible. Any records kept locally, paper, hardened data storage, even human memories, after a full-scale glassing, they're just gone. Thankfully, though, the Office of Naval Intelligence, or ONI, had furnished me with a list of interviewees. That's how I'd gotten Dion. But I wanted to go the extra mile with this story. So I'd hit up some of my old connections in the outer colonies looking for more sources. Ellie was my only hit so far. Did you keep in touch with John?
No, I wasn't allowed to use Waypoint much when I was little. But I did keep in touch with Katrina. We still talk, actually. You know, she probably remembers John. I'm gonna tell her I talked to you. Wait, what was this for again? It's a military thing?
Oh, no, John is the Master Chief.
What?
Yeah, John became the Master Chief.
Like the Master Chief?
Yep.
Oh my god, no way, are you serious?
I'm not kidding you, I'm telling
my
you.
god, that's crazy.
Ellie lost her mind for a few minutes. I guess it's not every day you find out that your childhood playmate saved the galaxy.
Oh my god, now I'm definitely telling Katrina. I mean, she is gonna freak out.
All right, so maybe Ellie wasn't going to be much help. I needed more of the young warrior angle. Here's Dion
Tell you
again.
the boxing story.
No, what's that?
Okay, so.
Not yet.
I taught the primary kids, right? But I also ran this boxing league at the high school.
Uh-huh.
Second week, we're doing drills in the gym. John walks in.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, John is in 6th grade at the time. I say, hey, John, what's up? He says, I want to sign up for boxing. And I say, John, you're 12. What are you talking about?
But John was adamant.
But I look at him and he ain't leaving.
Right.
So I said, okay, what the hell? Figure let it be a formative lesson for the kid. I don't know what it. So I put him in the ring with one of the smaller guys. John pummeled this boy. It was over in about 15 seconds, okay? So, all right. Well, I put him in with this bruiser. Now, a real good fighter.
Yeah.
Okay? Good fighter. 2 punches. John laid him out. 12 years old.
I liked talking to Dion. He was warm and funny in that grandfatherly memory lane kind of way. I realized I'd gotten lost in it all when the narrative took a dark turn.
But then, one week, John just didn't show up.
It was 25-24. John was 13. That's when the nightmare of the insurrection that had been plaguing the outer colonies finally landed on John's community. Under pressure from UNSC troops, the rebels were on their last leg, desperately seizing territory in the region and launching paranoid inquisitions to find spies. Civilian abductions and interrogations became commonplace.
They would just, question you. Just these meaningless questions for hours and hours.
Thomas Wu was living on a neighboring colony when the rebels showed up and hit hard, sweeping up Thomas and thousands of others in raids. What followed was months of horribly overcrowded detainment, neglect, and often constant questioning.
Did you know this guy? What are the encryption codes for this system, that system? And you have no idea what they're even asking you.
In the final couple months, Thomas says his captors started coming unhinged, and then toward the end, they just disappeared,
They were gone.
leaving Thomas and hundreds of others locked up, starving. I don't want to play this part of the interview, but I'll tell you, it got bad. He talks about being packed in like sardines, warm bodies, cold bodies, people dying in the dark, the smell. He doesn't know how long it lasted, maybe weeks, but Thomas and many others survived. They made it out.
Well, we helped each other. We looked out for each other. And I mean that was the only way. We made it through to the liberation, and then we left. We never looked back.
When I asked him where the survivors relocated to, Thomas began to list off which cities were safe for refugees at the time. Decades later, he can still recite them all from memory. I asked about John's hometown.
Perth City.
What about Elysium City?
No. Insurrectionist cesspool. Yeah, no, they got it bad there.
Dion Govender confirms this.
In Elysium City, people just disappeared back then. Just happened. Once the insurrectionists took over, whole neighborhoods just got scooped up.
This went on for months.
Every day.
He talks about watching his community get torn apart slowly, every day. I asked him about John.
Yeah. Him and his parents. Sean missed the first practice and the last one. Back then, it seemed like everybody had... I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Take your time. It was hard watching Dion break down like this. He just looked defeated. These kinds of interviews are brutal. I wanted to comfort him, but it just felt condescending. Like I have any idea what it was like for him. So we were quiet for a bit. Before we ended, though, he said this.
I think that if anything good can be said to have come from all of this, it's that everyone who went through it can know that their struggle wasn't for nothing. When you have a young man who can rise up from something like this and do what John has done, he honors all of us.
Dion believed in John, the way the rest of us believe in the Master Chief. He made it seem like this tragedy that shaped him was almost necessary. I certainly felt like I had the proper beginnings to a hero's origin story. Michael Sullivan, also known as Sully, works for the ONI in public relations. Sully had hooked me up with the assignment in the first place. Sully had arranged a face-to-face interview with ONI Vice Admiral Gabriela Dvorak. That not only got me off-world, but it was on board the newest Autumn-class heavy cruiser, the UNSC Under the Breach. Got a private shuttle up, full luxury. They had me riding in style. When I came aboard, Dvorak even greeted me personally. Now, civilians aren't normally allowed on board an active duty ship, let alone given this sort of attention.
Please, call me Gabriella.
Okay. This was not the kind of hospitality I was used to. What brings you way out here?
Work.
She told me she was on a detachment and in the neighborhood. I guess I lucked out. The white glove treatment continued too. Captain's mess, officers' quarters, the whole thing. By the time we finally got to her office for the interview, Dvorak could have said anything, and I'd have been thrilled. But she's the real deal, and she jumped right into it.
It was that finally moment. After all the fighting was done, I was helping lead all the prisoners out of the containers.
As a lieutenant in the UNSC, Gabriella not only took part in the ground operations that freed John and countless others from the rebel labor camps in Elysium City, but she remembered the 13-year-old as well. She described the liberation.
When you saw them, what had been done to them, you realized who you'd been fighting to save. The aftermath of it, it was ugly. Everyone was streaming out into the daylight, squinting, limping, just gray and fragile and sickly. Their backs were hunched, all their eyes just staring at the ground. I mean, they looked dead.
That's when she saw John.
He was sticking out like a sore thumb. In the middle of all this just beaten humanity, there's this tall, young kid walking toward me, towering over the others, his shoulders back, his eyes forward, and when he passed me, he looked right at me. Looked in my eyes. Yeah, I mean, that doesn't sound like much, but that eye contact coming from someone in that moment who'd been in that circumstance was shocking. He looked malnourished and dehydrated like everybody else, but he was so young. And whatever had broken all these people, it hadn't broken him.
In the aftermath, Dvorak remained stationed in Elysium City, working in the refugee camps. From the first day, John stepped up to help Gabriella with her duties. She came to know him well over the next several months.
There was a point when he told me about his parents, that they'd been abducted along with him. He didn't say much, but they didn't make it.
Her understanding was that it had gotten ugly in there. They died a couple days apart, a few weeks before the liberation, and John was there when it happened. On the rare occasion when John opened up about this, Dvorak says it was memorable.
He would get this look on his face when he talked about it. It's hard to describe. I'd see it on him other times, too. He seemed to feel the weight of all that had happened, but still, he was calm. Not angry, not desperate, just resolute. He was a remarkable young man.
Like so many people at the time in Elysium City and throughout this region of the galaxy, John had lost his home, his family, everything. People packed up whatever they had left, got out of town, and most never looked back. But Dion Govender, John's boxing coach, said many of them found a way to get some measure of closure.
Yeah, definitely. We all got separated and spread out across the planet and the colonies, but some of us were able to cobble together a list of names. I don't know, kind of a memorial that grew longer as we got more information. I remember seeing John's parents' names on the list early on, but not John. After he missed that last practice, never saw him again, but I remember thinking, that's okay. You know, as long as I never see his name on this list, that's okay. And I never did.
His will to survive left an impression on then-Lieutenant Gabriella Dvorak as well.
I think John just didn't want to be a victim anymore. I remember him telling me he was going to enlist. He said he was going to make a difference. I've never been more sure of another person than I was of him when he said that.
Out of the chaos of war, from the rubble, a young John was able to forge a purpose for himself. A purpose that would drive him to become the hero the galaxy would one day need him to be. This is the kind of turn in a story that gives me patriotic goosebumps. I was feeling genuinely moved on my trip back home.
Well, as you can see, I've pretty much permanently stationed myself on this beach.
That was my next interview. Jacob Walker, retired Navy. He lives in a beach community way out on Castellaneta. The first thing I noticed about Walker when he answered my call was that he wasn't wearing a shirt, which made us both laugh. He explained that after 28 years of service, as far as he was concerned, it was all R&R all the time. I couldn't argue with that philosophy. He slipped on a t-shirt and I asked him about the Master Chief.
Oh, hell yeah, John. You bet your ass I remember him.
Walker's career began 3 decades ago with Naval Force Reconnaissance School at Black Sea. Little did he know boot camp would turn out to be something he'd never forget. Walker was there alongside the young man who would become the Master Chief. The gravity of that was not lost on him.
I mean, they pushed us real hard, but John, well, he'd push us even harder, not even trying. You screwed up, you didn't know whether to be more scared of the CO or John.
At first, though, Walker was unimpressed.
Oh, no, man. I remember, I think it was the first week, there was a lot of talk. We were outside the mess tent, me and these other 2 jackasses getting into it, chests all puffed up and talking about being cold-blooded killers and stepping on necks, all that. I wanted to be in leadership one day. And, of course, I was 19 and jacked as hell, so, well, I figured I only had so much competition. Meanwhile, there's this quiet nobody from nowhere standing on the fringes looking at the horizon. John. Yeah, first I thought he was 20, 21. He's a big dude. Turns out he was only 16. I mean, that kid wasn't even on my radar.
Soon, though, Walker says all that machismo fell to the wayside and a real leader emerged in John.
Training exercises, whoever finished last got the brunt. I mean, last one in on a 20-mile, you're walking back while we catch a Pelican dropship. And that there's some downright lethal terrain, too. Reach is, well, it was a tough planet. But John, man, he took lead every time. A lot of risk and responsibility. Didn't have to, but, well, he did it. And then halfway in, he'd start to hang back, you know, and help the stragglers. You're injured, whatever. He'd be right there helping you out.
And then without fail, Walker says, John always made sure he came in last and took the punishment.
He made us all want to follow his lead. Try harder and help each other. I mean, we're supposed to do that, but nobody ever really wanted to until then. Anyway, we did it. But taking the hit for the group, now that was John's thing. I only challenged him for the honor once. I never made that mistake again.
Walker's in his early 50s now, but he seemed lit up with the energy of a much younger man. It seemed the will that he and the other recruits had, in a sense, borrowed from John so many years ago, was still inspiring Walker. It was remarkable. He knew John, lived with him for months, yet to him, John still seemed to be an almost mythical character.
What he was able to do, getting back on his own like that in the pitch black, no nav equipment, man, he was inhuman.
My flight to ONI's Boston headquarters left in 3 hours. They were calling me in. Hi, I'm here to see Michael Sullivan.
Do you have an appointment?
Yes, I'm Ben Giraud. I have a 1 o'clock.
I'll let him know you're here, Ben.
Okay, thank you. The whole ONI facility was sleek and stark. Everywhere you look, it's sharp lines, the highest quality materials.
Mr. Sullivan will see you now.
Now, thank you. I stepped into a narrow, empty hallway full of closed doors. I walked down the hallway past what I assumed were offices. When I got to the end of the hall, Sullivan's door opened at the last possible second. When I walked in, Sullivan didn't look up. He was sitting behind his desk, intently working on his compad. Hey.
Ben, I'm glad you made it.
I stood there awkwardly for a bit. Should I?
Make yourself comfortable.
Okay, yeah. He continued swiping on his compad. I sat down in the chair. So,
How's the story, Ben?
It's good. It's good.
You getting what you need?
Absolutely.
Want to make sure you're getting all your questions answered.
Great. No, yeah, I am. I mean,
Perfect. There's someone who'd like to talk to you, Ben.
The buildings were all connected underground, and the whole complex was far bigger than it had seemed outside. As he led me deeper into the maze, the feel gradually became less corporate and more military. Didn't realize they let civilians in this far.
It's a special day, Ben.
Sullivan led me into a large, dark conference room. In the center of it, there was a massive, well-lit conference table with several chairs around it.
Have a seat.
I did as I was told and sat in one of the chairs.
Need any water?
I'm all good. Thank you.
Oh, do you need to do a mic check or anything? I want to make sure you get all of this. This is gonna be big. May I present to you Senior Chief Petty Officer Franklin Mendez.
Hi, Ben. How are you?
I stood up. The man who walked in was extraordinarily decorated. Gold stars, silver stars, bronze stars, purple hearts, the Legion of Honor. He looked gritty and hardened, probably by decades of battle. Good afternoon, sir.
We gonna talk about the chief?
Mendez is the man who trained the chief, Ben. I told you I'd take care of you. You're gonna have everything you need for this story.
It was an interview.
Yes, of course. So you're the man to talk to when it comes to the Spartans, huh?
That's correct.
I was about to get an insider's perspective from the man who personally trained the Master Chief.
Yeah, Chief's got a bad habit of jumping out of the dropship instead of waiting for it to land. That's his armor absorbed the fall. But that's his prerogative at this point, I guess. And it gets him a hell of a drop on the enemy.
No civilian had ever heard this kind of detail about the Master Chief. Mendez told me that it wasn't long after boot camp that John's unique combination of abilities and drive established a fledgling reputation for the young man.
That kid blew me away. His acumen, his mental quickness, his physical abilities, tactical judgment. I could tell even from a young age that John was a burgeoning, complete package. There was no question in my mind that he was ready for the augmentations. And he couldn't wait.
Once John had the procedures done, Mendez said everyone was blown away by the results.
Medical engineers said his systems integrated flawlessly with the tech. His recovery time was impressively brief. But what was most incredible was how quickly his brain was able to acclimate to the upgrades. It can be like starting from scratch again after those procedures. You're remapping your whole neurology. But while the other guys were still trying to learn to walk, John was running and jumping and kicking ass. I'd never seen anything like it.
This was the birth of the Master Chief. He advanced rapidly, proving himself time and again in the field, constantly re-raising the bar for what a Spartan could be asked to do. Throughout his career, Mendez had gotten to analyze everything these elite soldiers have done in the field. He regaled me with accounts of the Spartan single-handedly taking out dozens of the Covenant. He spoke to the insuperable speed, strength, and accuracy that continued developing over the years. He spoke to Chief's unwavering dedication, his insurmountable will. But according to Mendez, it was something else that would ultimately inform this military legend.
I've never seen a man, augmented or not, be able to make such extraordinarily high-stakes decisions so quickly. Chief will find himself facing a complex scenario in a dense field of variables and almost instantly weigh the costs and benefits, immediately generating a creative solution. He faces dilemmas, ethical, tactical, tough situations that would buckle most human beings if they had a year to mull it over. But he makes the call, usually on the fly, and it's the right call. It's extraordinary. Not to mention, of course, that he then makes a superhuman jump onto an enemy craft in mid-flight, yanks the pilot out of the cockpit, commandeers the bird, and then rams it back down the enemy's throat. The man can execute, too.
Mendez tells me that the chief has come to expand and deepen the definition of what serving is. In many ways, Mendez seems to think it's that decision-making ability that sets the chief apart. It's what makes him a leader. It's what's made him a hero.
Wow.
I'm glad you're doing this story, Ben. It's about time the Spartans finally get their due. People need to understand the level of sacrifice that the chief and all the Spartans make to keep us safe.
You talked a bit about Chief's personality, his dry wit, his loyalty. I'm sure you guys don't sit around talking about your feelings much, but in your opinion, do you think being held at that level of responsibility is hard for him? Protecting a whole galaxy, it seems like it would be an unimaginable heavy burden.
Well, lucky for you, you don't have to imagine it. No, it is a heavy burden. But Chief has broad shoulders. He's able to make those decisions and get it done. And he takes that task on willingly and with vigor. It's inspiring.
Our duty as soldiers is to protect humanity.